I'm going to be talking today about Guerrilla UX techniques, and I'm hoping that I don't bore you too much with it. I'm going to ramble. Has anyone done any user testing before? Guessing you guys know it. Cool. Who's done lab-based testing? More formal. Guerrilla? Sort of. Do people know what Guerrilla is? Yeah. Cool. Right, I shall explain that as we go, but just get an idea. So, first thing I'm going to do is talk about these three core areas. So, what is user experience? Why does it matter? Why do a talk about Guerrilla UX? And if you decide to do it and go forward with it, getting the most out of it. So actually making sure that it works for you and you can apply it to what you're trying to do. Cool, so what is user experience? The ISO definition is a person's perception and responses that result from the use or anticipated use of a product, system or service. That's the technical term. It basically means that people enjoy it and it does what they expect it to do. The next one is, why does it matter? Out of the people here, has anyone done any user experience work before? So like user research at all? Okay. So,
I see a lot of students have done it, but they're not putting their hands up.
Being shy, okay. So people need to see value in a site or app, and sometimes that's in because of what it is, and sometimes it's in the way that it does it, as in it makes a process a lot easier than the competitors. If you provide a good user experience, people are more likely to come back, just like customer service in a shop. If you provide a negative experience, it probably marks you a lot more than you think it would. Sites and apps that people find hard to use are generally ignored, and chances are, is if you're guessing what your users do, after you've been making those choices for a while, you've probably become entrenched in some preconceptions about how people actually use your app. So going out and sense checking with your users is a good thing because it allows you to course correct and basically change your point of view based on your understanding. And the way you can achieve a good user experience is, the first one is actually going out and doing some research, so just general understanding, doing some user engagement and doing some testing and actually checking and validating what you know. So why do a talk about Guerrilla UX? For those who don't know me, I volunteer with a local group called NUX, and a couple of there's some other NUXs in here as well, I think. From a couple of months ago, we had What Users Do come in, and they presented a user experience survey, and also quite a nice workshop on choosing the right approach for user testing. Both links are here. These slides will be available to download, and I'll build them out resources. And it was quite interesting that the survey presented basically came back with why people don't do any user experience testing. And the top ones were no budget, limited IT tech resources, capacity as well. And then there's a sort of like, I can't see, agency. With agencies, it was more around generating traffic as well, which I thought was quite an interesting thing. But it basically came down to cost, time, and it wasn't a core focus. But when they asked the respondents to this test, there was about 1,400 respondents in the survey, I think. Please select the top 3 user experience testing techniques that you perceive to provide the best ROI, even if you haven't used them. And this blew me away, is that lab-based testing was at the top. That was obviously seen as sort of like the gold standard. If you do that, you're probably going to get it right. Then it comes down into content testing, which is like multivariate testing. Remote user testing, which is kind of what users do, if anyone's aware of them. So you put some tasks online and remote access them, the jar Rapid records how someone interacts with the screen. And then just kind of a few other ones, but then Guerrilla user testing was way down the bottom of the list. And I thought it was quite shocking to see that the user testing in a lab had really, really high sort of like standards of high perception, and the Guerrilla testing wasn't, and it got me quite interested, because I find Guerrilla testing actually a really good thing and really cheap. So looking at the two, basically lab-based testing, you get quite a lot out of it. So users are often in a more formal environment, informal environment, so it's more relaxed, more comfortable. It's great for bringing teams together while the user's testing it. You can actually have a team in the observation lab watching everything that's going on. And that also provokes discussion and debate while that's going on. When you're setting up your tasks, you get quite a lot of help and support from the agency that you engage with in the lab. Make sure your tasks are fair, balanced, etc. When the moderator's doing the review, they're less likely to introduce bias into the tasks. You get the reports out of it. Ain't more likely. More likely to use advanced data collection. So if you go to a lab, you're more likely to have access to some of the more interesting bits of technology, so eye tracking, etc. But there's a few downsides to it. It's costly. You're less likely to want to invest it in an early stage of development. So if you're just doing concepts or coming up with beta prototypes, actual prototypes, early versions of code, you're less likely to want to go into a lab because of the investment you're going to have to make into it. And partly because of the cost, you're going to be less likely to be iterative. And Guerrilla testing actually tackles quite a lot of that stuff as well. So the two are more comparable than the perception sort of like implied, I think. But if you look at Guerrilla testing, it doesn't really require any specialist equipment. You just really need a laptop. Because it's on a laptop, you can pretty much take it anywhere. So if you need to test in certain scenarios, you can take it to those people. Cafe testing is, if you go into a cafe, if that's your type of user, you quite often see people plugged into laptops, so that's actually as close to real world testing as you can get in some cases. And these are the bits that I thought that user testing would be, or Guerrilla testing was most valuable for. So early stage testing, you can test on paper prototypes, you can test on proper prototypes. If you've got part-baked code, testing code, stuff like that, you can actually test, make sure that it's doing what you hope it's doing. And because of the nature of having it on a laptop and just being able to pick it up and go, the biggest problem is actually organising users and getting users together. But if you do that and you say maybe, okay, we'll do a test now and we'll do a test in 2 weeks, you can actually be quite iterative around it. So you can do a lot more with it, build it into your development processes, and the overhead is basically your staff or your time and getting a room. It's quite a simple one to overcome, and you can do it quite cheaply without actually having to invest too much. Hello. But there's some negative things to it as well. If you're not used to it, and if you're not totally aware of what you're doing, you could introduce moderator or reviewer bias, which is a concern, but depending on what you're doing, you can probably build around that. The downside is you're providing extra work to your team, so you're giving other people more work to do, but it's still probably cheaper than actually getting a lab. And sometimes it's challenging to find a good testing room. Like, to find somewhere where a user's going to feel relaxed and you're going to get the best out of them, sometimes that's a bit of a challenge. But if you do decide to go through with it, and you want to get the most out of your research, here are some of the good places to start. So, any users are better than none. So, has everyone seen the Nielsen graph of 5 user testing? No? Jakob Nielsen has got a graph, and basically 5 user testing provides about 75% of errors on a user test. And if you test with 9 users, you get up to about 98%. So if you can do testing between 5 and 10 users, you actually get quite a lot of data out of that. And If you were to maybe split it and do 5 users one week, do an iteration, do some development, and then 5 users the next week, you're getting more out of that as well, because you're less likely to find the same bugs, and you're stretching out the process over a task or a development cycle. When you're looking for users, try and aim for a good cross-section. Try and avoid expert users. Try and go for like the everyman users. If you want if you're designing an app for expert users, get them in, but they shouldn't form the bigger part of your user testing strategy. And test with a testing session should last no more than about 30 to 45 minutes. Anything over that, and the person doing the task is probably going to be getting quite bored and quite frustrated. When you're designing your tasks, try and create meaningful tasks. So I'm going to look into that in more detail, but tasks work best when they're not instructions and they're more scenarios that the person can make their own judgments around and identify their own solutions. When you're talking to the user and getting them to do the task, try and get them to do either think aloud, which is the easiest one, or if you've got the technology to do it, you can do retrospective think aloud, where you get them to do the tasks in the short time frame, so it's as close to real world example as you can get. And the retrospective means that they can go over and basically provide director's commentary over their own user test, so you get a better understanding of what they were thinking. And this one's quite important. You don't really see this one when you're looking into guerrilla testing, but where possible, you should always try and rotate your tasks. By presenting every user the tasks in the same order, so task 1, task 2, task 3, every time, the users have always got the same information by the time they get to the 5th task, so you can't really work out, it makes it more difficult to work out if a user has already found it by browsing, already found something by browsing through the site. So by the time they get to task 5, they go to it straight away. So it skews your data a bit. By rotating your tasks, it kind of takes that bias out of it, and it makes it a little bit easier to ensure that you get a fair test. And basically give yourself a discussion guide. It doesn't have to be complicated. It just needs to be a list of tasks that you can read through. The wording's the same, and it allows you to make sure that everyone gets exactly the same instruction. So I'm just looking at time. The people who have done guerrilla testing, have they done it by themselves, or have they actually had a scribe with them? Anyone have a scribe? Cool, good. That's actually, personally, my most important one. That's the one that I think you get the most out of. So when you're designing your tasks, don't be too specific. Don't give the instruction of find a field, or basically go find a form and fill it in. Because you're pretty much saying, here's the answer, click around and you might find it. If you give a user a more general question or general problem to solve, after receiving a new camera, you've noticed the lens is cracked, using the site, can you request a replacement? That allows them to work out what the best course of action is. So you might want them to complete the form, but they might have a different idea. They might be looking for, they could be looking for support or some other thing. And that allows you to see if the way you've designed the site allows for an adaptable approach. It doesn't allow for one person just to do one thing. And with the scribe, the scribe has so many good bits to it. The first one is its second set of eyes. So it's not just one person's opinion on what's going on. And after the user test, you can get together, you can compare notes, and you can decide if something was important or not. That removes the bias effects that you can get. It saves you hours of review time as well, because you're getting quick notes. And if you do those notes in a format that makes it easier for you to skim through. So if a user has an issue with a navigation system, if you can mark it with an N straight away and you can time code it, that means that you can go straight back to the video, check that 10-15 seconds, and you can move on. So this basically gives you a quick report that you can run with straight away out of a user test, and normally gives you enough that you can go off and actually start telling people, here, go watch this 5 minutes of video out of what is potentially 10 hours. So when you're doing it, there's a number of bits of software that I'm only going to talk about 3 today, but they're going to be kind of my favourite ones at the minute. The first one is Silverback. Has anyone heard of that? Cool. It's Mac only, but it's only about, I think it's about 60 bucks, 60 quid. And it's by far sort of the best one for, in terms of value for money. It does a screen capture, it captures live video and audio, so you can hear when the users sign, you can see when they slap their face, whoops, that would. You can see when they slap their face, and it compiles it into one very nicely condensed video. There's other bits of software, there's Bandicam on the PC, but it doesn't give you quite the same amount of data collection. But that sort of software is really good. Anyone here do responsive stuff? Responsive sites? Cool. There's this one that's been out a few months now, I think. It's called UX Recorder. Has anyone heard of that before? Cool. It's really good. It's basically Silverback for an iPad. So the camera records the face again, the mic records the voice. As they're clicking around, it records all the clicks. And you get the same outputs that you would get from Silverback. Now, if you plug a laptop into a projector, you can sort of do it on screen, but when you're doing it on an iPad, you can plug in a VGA connector, etc., run it to a projector, so a scribe and the user tester don't have to be sit there jammed over the user's shoulder. So it feels like they're using it in a real environment, and they can go off and do their own thing, which is really, really like that one. And this one as well. Does anyone do paper prototyping? Cool. We don't do too much of it because we do a lot of sketching, but we don't tend to do the paper prototyping. I've never really warmed to the breaks in flow that it provides. But this bit of software popped up on my iTunes a couple of weeks ago. It's called Pop. Let me just jump into quick. So this is what Pop does. You use your camera on your phone, so you do your sketches, and you hold the phone over it, and it just takes snapshots. And then it allows you to put hotspots in. So you can actually turn your paper prototype into a real prototype. So you can actually go off and test it. And this is genius. 5 quid. And you can basically, you can cover a lot of ground with this. This basically makes guerrilla testing really quick and easy to do. 2 people in a room can sketch out the stuff, come up with solutions. You build the prototype, and you can then actually go out and test it with other people, send it to them and stuff like that. Yeah, this is my favourite thing on there. Cool. And the last bit, sorry, I'm kind of trying to rattle through it. I've got 20 minutes, and I'm trying to be as useful as I can. Making your research go further. The best thing to do is to, where possible, never put your eggs all in one basket. If you can do more than one approach, you get a much fuller insight. So Guerrilla user testing is great, and it gives you lots of information and lots of feedback. So you can either focus on functional stuff, does it do what it says it does, or you can focus on the more emotive stuff, like can someone get through it happily, are they satisfied, does it do what they expect, and that sort of thing. If you do, so that gives you user testing, but if you do it on a small sample, that's qualitative. So like there's only 10 people there, you can only draw some subjective conclusions from it. If you move forward and you want to turn that into quantitative, the easiest way of scaling that up is to take those tasks once you're happy with them and you think they're working properly, and send them off to remote testing. And there's software like What Users Do is one of them, but you've got Loop 11 and some other sites, and you can send out basically online versions of your usability tests to scale your data to make it more robust. The second piece is user interviews are really good, and quite often, again, because of time constraints, people don't tend to do a lot of them. But if you can do like 5 or 10, you can get some themes, get some ideas, find out what people are interested in. And once you've got something that you feel is quite robust again, you can scale it up and you can send it out to a survey. You can probably get a few hundred respondents quite easily. And that allows you to basically validate the findings from the interviews, and this allows you to validate the findings from the user testing. Just because 3 people see it, if you do 5 user testing and 3 people see it, that could give you a slightly skewed response. But if 100 people see it and it scales up to that 30%, etc., you get more out of it. The other thing that gives you is it gives you the top 2 are qualitative because they're small samples, and the bottom 2 are quantitative, larger samples. The other thing that allows you to do is it allows you to see where the themes cross over. If you do the user testing you can probably tie into the interview. You can see if there's consistencies in the way that people think about things. And where all of these cross over is basically the sweet spot. It's probably the areas that you should sort of like concentrate on most. And where they diverge, they're probably the areas you actually want to research more. Because if your user testing starts to show you one thing, but the interviews and the surveys tell you something else, there's a disconnect. And it probably means that you just need to work out where the intent of both of the ideas and how to converge them into a sensible tool. Sorry, very quick conclusions. Basically, there's a lot of tools you can use, and it's not as complicated as it looks like. So, you can adapt the approach to suit your needs. The tools out there, it doesn't have to be scientific. You're not after. The chances are you're not always looking for statistically rigorous information. You're looking for something you can make a decision off, and you can have some faith that you're making the right decision off. So, the example I was going to use, but I decided not to, but I think I will. It's more like Jamie Oliver than it is being like a scientist. It's about a chef. That sort of concept of you take little bits of different approaches, get the ingredients right, and you get something you're happy with and that suits your needs. It doesn't have to be expensive. You can scale the way you do it in terms of people and stuff like that. Once you've got that data, it's really good for getting buy-in, not only from your stakeholders but from other users, and you can go out and you can publicise what you're doing and the benefits it's giving, and it encourages more people to give you more information. Satisfied and happy users mean a successful project. So, thank you.